Uh, let's talk about what the president just said a little while ago. He said the U.S. should have killed General Soleimani a long time ago. Was that ever under serious consideration during your tenure during the Obama administration?
Well, during my tenure as National Security Advisor, we didn't have the opportunity, to my knowledge. Had we had the opportunity, and we would have given it, obviously, very careful consideration, weighing the pros and the cons. And frankly, as then and as now, it's not clear that when you look at the strategic landscape and the costs and the consequences of such an action, whether the benefits outweigh the real risks. But the most important thing, Wolf, is we took these serious situations under very careful consideration. We would weigh deliberately the risks and the benefits. We would have considered the second and third order consequences. And most importantly, we would have made very sure that before we took such an action that was undoubtedly going to lead to escalation, that we'd put in place the preparations to protect and defend American personnel in the region.
Because you knew clearly that Qasem Soleimani was responsible for the deaths of hundreds of U.S. military personnel in Iraq.
He was indeed. And that's why during the Bush administration, as has been reported, there was an opportunity and the serious consideration was given to it. But at the same time, as we experienced during the Obama administration and in the early stages of our involvement in Iraq, the Iranians were very active in targeting American personnel with very dangerous weapons. That fell off after 2011, and it escalated again in recent months as the pressure on the Iranian regime increased in the context of President Trump's massive pressure campaign.
Well, clearly in recent days, the U.S. had the intelligence of where Qasem Soleimani was. They had the military capability, a drone strike, of killing him. Did President Trump, do the right thing?
I think, Wolf, that's a very complicated question. I am doubtful that ultimately it'll prove to be the right thing. In the first instance, obviously, any of us who are familiar with Qasem Soleimani and the extraordinary blood he has on his hands has to be happy to see him off the battlefield. He was a murderer and a terrorist of the worst order. Having said that, the question is whether we are safer, and Americans in the region and around the world are safer as a result of his targeted assassination than they would have been had we pursued other means to deal with whatever was purportedly the imminent threat at hand. So I am not sure about that. I'm quite concerned as I look at this that there are very few ways to de-escalate this situation that doesn't lead to a wider conflict. President Trump saying, I did this to stop a war, not to start it, seems to imply that he gets all the votes in this. And of course, the Iranians get a serious set of votes, and there's no question in my mind that they will retaliate in a very serious way at a time and a place of their choosing, and maybe multiple times in multiple places. And the question then is, what will President Trump do? Will he respond as well, in which case this escalatory cycle increases and the risk of war gets greater and greater, or does he back down? And if he backs down, the Iranians will then, in all likelihood, interpret that as an opportunity to push further. So either way, we're likely down a path of conflict, I'm afraid.
Are Americans safer today than they were 2 days ago?
I don't think so. I think, for the moment, perhaps a plot, if you're to believe the administration, has been disrupted. They haven't provided any details, no briefings to Congress, no public statements.
They're briefing some staff members right now.
Apparently, but even that, as you heard from the members you've interviewed today, senators and members of Congress who are relevant on these key committees, they don't know the specifics behind the intelligence. So we have to wait and see. But even if it were the case that in fact there were imminent plots underway, how to deal with that is not a black and white issue. Taking Soleimani out doesn't necessarily mean that those plots can't proceed.
Well, how worried are you? What capability does Iran have right now to seriously threaten the United States?
Well, Wolf, that's absolutely the right question, because if you look at how Iran's postured in the region, they have infinite opportunities through their militia proxies to attack us throughout Iraq, throughout the whole Levant region, Syria, Lebanon. Israel is now at risk. The whole Gulf region is at risk, where we have large military installations, as you know, all throughout the Gulf region. Afghanistan is another place where the United States could be targeted by Iran. There's a whole shipping lanes of the Persian Gulf region, which are now potentially active war zones with real risks to the global economy. And then there, of course, Wolf, as you and I know, Iran has cells, proxy cells and direct cells that it can control, that it can light up in Europe, in Latin America, in Africa, and even perhaps in the United States. So the risk to American civilians, as well as diplomats and military personnel, now throughout many regions of the world, is much heightened.
Is it fair to say that Qasem Soleimani was the conductor of this ability of Iran to spread its influence throughout that entire region, through Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, down near Saudi Arabia, in Yemen, that he was the orchestrator of that?
He was an orchestrator, but he wasn't a one-man band. And that's the problem. There is no way that I can envision that Iran takes this hit and decides, oh, never mind, we'll just stand down. I think the survival of the regime and its leadership prominence in the region in its own mind depends on a strong and forceful reaction. And so that's how you get this escalatory dynamic. And, you know, somebody's going to have to back down, or this is going to go to a place that's going to be quite dangerous and concerning.
Do you trust what you're hearing from the Trump administration right now, the initial information about the intelligence assessments?
Wolf, I wish I could. This administration, sadly, tragically, has a record of almost daily misrepresenting the facts, telling falsehoods about issues big and very small. So it's hard to have confidence on the face at their representations. I'd like to see the evidence. I'd like to see the details behind the information that apparently led to this attack. Certainly what Qasem Soleimani has done and Iran's record would support what the administration is saying, not least in the recent context, but one can't be certain without seeing the facts.
So, but basically, we haven't seen any of this intelligence yet, and very limited intelligence has been shared, at least with some staffers in the House Armed Services Committee, the Senate Armed Services Committee, but very limited information. Do you suspect that administration officials right now are lying?
I'm not prepared to say that. I hope certainly not. If they were lying about something of this magnitude, I hate to think of the consequences for the United States. But as I said, given their track record, one can't be certain, as one would hope to be in a context like this, that the commander-in-chief and his top lieutenants are giving us the whole story.
You agree with Leon Panetta, the former defense secretary, that the U.S. right now is closer to all-out war with Iran than it's been in 40 years?
I think that's correct.
You think that's realistic, though?
I do. I think it's unfortunately very much a risk now, because never in the last several decades have we or they taken an action that's quite so provocative and explosive. And we have leadership on both sides that have made quite clear that they're not backing down, at least in the foreseeable future.
Susan Rice, thanks very much for coming in.